method is a traditional approach to foreign language teaching that emphasizes the study of grammar rules, translation exercises, and the memorization of vocabularies. Its nature is, it assumes that all language acquisition is primarily an intellectual process involving conscious understanding and application of grammatical principles. So we have here different key characteristics of the grammar translation method. We have it focuses on grammar rules, translation exercises, vocabulary memorization, reading comprehension, formal and literacy language, teacher-centered approach, and the use of native language or the L1. So first, let's tackle what is focus on grammar rules. So when we say focus on grammar rules, the grammar translation approach puts a strong emphasis on the learning grammar rules. Students are taught the rules of the target language, such as how to form sentences, the use of different tenses and verb conjugations, and then applying correct word endings. Learning grammar comes first, and students are expected to apply these rules when writing and translating. So for example, imagine you are learning the past tense rules. So the teacher explains that to form the past tense of regular verbs, we usually add ed. So for example, the word walk becomes walked, play becomes played. And then, after learning the rule, the students practice making sentences using the past tense. The second one is the translation exercises. So in here, the students often translate sentences or text from their native language to their target language and then vice versa. This will help them connect new words and grammar rules with what they already know in their own language. So for example is, if a teacher gives a sentence in English, she is reading a book, the student must translate it into Spanish if the student is a Spaniard. So the English word, the English sentence which is, she is reading a book becomes, ella está leyendo un libro. And then, they may translate a Spanish sentence back into English to check their understanding. Next one, we have here the vocabulary memorization. So vocabulary memorization is very important in grammar translation method because it is a major activity in grammar translation approach. The students here are usually given a list of words along with their meanings, which they are expected to remember for future exercises, tests, and translations. So for example, an English word apple, and you translate it with the Spanish word, it becomes manzana. The next one is a friend, becomes amigo, and then the house, which means casa in Spanish. So the students must memorize these words and be able to use them when writing sentences or translating text. The fourth one, we have here the reading comprehension. So the reading comprehension involves reading text and understanding their meanings by applying grammar rules and vocabulary knowledge. The students are expected to read carefully, answer questions, and translate what they read. This helps improve their ability to understand written language. So for example, if a student reads a short story about a historical event such as George Washington becoming the first president in the United States, after reading they might answer some questions like, who was the first president of the United States and when did he become the president? So next one, we have the formal and literary language. So the grammar translation approach often uses formal and literary text rather than everyday conversations. So the students here work with the classical literatures, historical text, or poetry to learn the language in its most structured and formal way. So for example is, the student might read and translate lines from Shakespeare's Hamlet such as to be or not to be. That is the question. So the teacher here will explain the meaning and the students translate it into their native language while discussing its deeper meaning. The next one is the teacher-centered approach. So in teacher-centered approach, the learning process is centered to the teacher only, who is the main source of the information. The teacher explains the grammar rules, they provide vocabulary, verb conjugations, they correct mistakes, and leads every step of the lessons. The students here mainly listen, take notes, and complete assignments based on the teacher's instructions. So, for example, during a lesson of verb tenses, the teacher will explain on how to form past tense and provide example on the board. The students will take note and practice by writing sentences based on examples given by the teacher. So, just like adding D or ED in the verb. The last one, which is the use of native language or the L1. So in here, in grammar translation method or approach, the student's native language is used frequently in the classroom. The teachers will explain the grammar rules, meaning of the words, and instructions in the native language to ensure students fully understand the lessons. So for example, is if the student is a Filipino, so an English teacher might explain the meaning of the word beautiful by saying maganda in Filipino. So this will help the student to quickly grasp the meaning of the word without any confusion. That's all for the key characteristics of the grammar translation approach. So next one, let's jump into the application in modern language classroom. So we have here three, which is the grammar instruction, translation activities, and reading comprehension. So first, in grammar instruction, it means teaching the rules of how a language works. It includes lessons of things like multi-word sentences, use of correct tenses, verb conjugations, and choosing the right words. In a modern classroom, a grammar is taught in a fun and interactive way. Not just giving lectures, or the teachers will explain the rule clearly by giving examples and let the students practice by doing exercises, playing games, or working in a group. So for example, if the lesson is about forming past tense verbs again, the teacher might say, to make the past tense of regular verbs, we usually add D and ED. For example, walk becomes walked, and play becomes played. And after explaining, the teacher might ask the students, what did you do last weekend? So that the student will answer the question using the past tense. For example, I visited my grandmother and I watched a movie. The next one is the translation activities. So in translation activities, it involves changing words or sentences from one language to another. In the modern classroom, the translation is used to help students understand new words and how sentences are built. It connects what students know in their native language with the language they're learning. However, teachers try to make translation fun and useful. Instead of just translating boring list of words, they might ask students to translate a favorite song, a simple story, or even a funny text message. This will make the learning feel more connected to real life. So for example, the teacher might say, let's translate this sentence from English to your native language. I love eating ice cream on a hot day. So the student will think about how to say that in their native language. Then the teacher checks if they use the right words to help them learn new vocabularies and sentence patterns. The third one is the reading comprehension. So in reading comprehension, it means understanding what you read. In the modern classroom, teachers don't just give students a text and questions to answer. They choose interesting stories, poems, articles, or even online content that students might enjoy. And after reading, the students might discuss the story, like guess what happens next, or even act out the scenes from it. So for example, a teacher could give students a short story about a kid who finds a lost puppy. And after reading, the teacher might ask questions like, why was the puppy lost? What would you do if you found a lost puppy, and how did the story end? So these questions will help the students think about what they read, use new words, and practice speaking the language in a natural way. Now let's move on to the important considerations of grammar translation method. So in here, it needs to have balance to address the learner's need and authenticity. So first is balance. Balance means mixing different types of activities to keep learning effective and interesting. While the grammar translation approach focuses on a lot of grammar rules and translation, it's important to balance this with other activities or tasks like speaking, listening, and creative writing. This way, students can use the language in real-life situations, not just on the paper. The second one is the learner's need. So in learner's need, every student learns differently. Some need more help with grammar, while others might struggle with vocabulary or reading. So the teacher should adjust lessons based on what students need most. This will make the learning more personal and effective. So for example, if a class finds the verb conjugation difficult, the teacher can spend extra time on that topic and provide easier examples before moving to the hard ones. And then the last one, we have the authenticity. It means using real-life examples, text, situations instead of just textbook exercises. Because it will help the students to see how the language is used in real context, making the learning more meaningful. For example, instead of translating random sentences, the students could translate a real new article or a message from a foreign friend. This shows them how the language works in the real world. So again, these are all the application in modern language classroom. We have the grammar instruction, translation activities, and reading comprehension. Alongside, we also have the important considerations, which talks about the balance in learning, addressing the learner's needs, and authenticity of the teaching. So that's all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be reporting about the historical development and timeline. In early 19th century or early 1880s, the GTM emerged in classroom for Latin and ancient Greek. This ship of course possesses its status as spoken language, making communicative method less relevant. The focus shifts to understanding the written text and translation. In mid-19th century or mid-1880s, the GTM expands to modern language classroom. During this time, the GTM became widely adopted in modern language classroom. This expansion was largely influenced by Karl Platz and Johann Stauffer. This method gained widespread popularity in Europe and in the United States, becoming a dominant approach for language teaching. And then in early 20th century or in 1930s, the GTM begins facing criticisms. It faces criticisms from proponents of more direct method, which focus on speaking and listening skills. In response, the Arabic method emerged as a partial alternative using text tailored for foreign language learners. And in the 1940s, World War II highlights the need for practical language skills, prompting the U.S. government to adopt language teaching methods based on linguistic and psychological theories. This shifts ultimately led to the development of the audio-lingual method. In mid-to-late 20th century, in 1960s, the audio-lingual method emerged. It became the dominant approach in U.S. language classrooms, largely replacing the GTM. This shift reflected a focus on speaking and listening skills, moving away from the traditional emphasis on grammar and translation. And then in the present day, or in the 21st century, GTM is no longer the primary context, especially for teaching classical languages and additionally for less commonly taught languages. Next is issues. First issue is limited focus on oral proficiency and communicative competence. The GTM prioritizes reading and writing skills over speaking and listening, neglecting the development of oral proficiency and communicative competence. It further explains that the critics argue for prioritizing practical communication skills including speaking and listening over solely focusing on reading and writing. And then overemphasis on translation and grammatical accuracy. The GTM's emphasis on translation and grammatical accuracy and can hinder learners' ability to use the language effectively in real-life situations. This suggests that focusing solely on accuracy and translation can create a disconnect between classroom and practical language. And then the third issue is teacher-centered approach. Grammar Translation Method or GTM often adopts a teacher-centered approach, limiting learners' autonomy and active participation. The GTM's emphasis on grammar rules, translation exercises, and teacher-led explanation suggests a teacher-centered approach. This contrasts with more learner-centered approaches like CLT, which prioritizes interaction and active language use. And then the fourth issue is lack of authentic language use. The grammar translation method often lacks authentic language use, relying on artificial exercises and contrived scenarios that don't reflect real-world communication. The need for communicative activities, interactive tasks, and authentic language use is to address the limitation of the GTM. This implies that the traditional GTM often lacks the real-world context and authentic communication necessary for effective language learning. And then the last issue is limited integration of technology. The GTM typically doesn't incorporate technology effectively, missing opportunities to enhance language learning through digital resources and interactive platforms. As the way to address the limitation of traditional GTM approach, it lacks integration of technology that is not considered essential for effective language use and learning. That's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the next reporter. My topic is all about the 5 proponents. So I have here 5 proponents. First is Johann Gottfried Somi. Second is Karl Platz. Third is Heinrich Gottfried Hollander. Fourth is Wilhelm von Humboldt. The fifth is Franz Bohm. So Johann Gottfried, his work as a translator of English novels into a German may have indirectly influenced the method's emphasis on translator. He is 1763 to 1810. The second is Karl Platz, 1803 and 1881. He is a German educator who developed language teaching materials and methodologies noted as GTM. He is considered a major proponent of method, and his textbooks were widely used. The third is Heinrich Gottfried. He is another German educator known for his Ollendorff method. Ollendorff method emphasized oral communication but also incorporated elements of GTM, particularly focused on grammar rules and translator exercises. The fourth one is Wilhelm von Humboldt. Humboldt's theories on language and culture influenced the development of language teaching methods, including the GTM. He emphasized on the grammar and the relationship between language and thought life. The fifth one is Franz Bohm. He is a linguist who contributed to comparative linguistics and study of Indo-European languages. And also his work helped to establish the importance of grammar and linguistic analysis and language teaching, which aligns with the GTM's principles. So focus on oral skills and communication. The GTM emphasizes reading and writing, neglecting speaking and listening, which is crucial for real-world communication. So I have here four criticism. First is the overemphasis on translation and grammar. That it focuses on translation and grammatical accuracy can hinder learners' ability to use the language natural and spontaneously. Second is the integration of communicative language teaching, which means CLT. It creating a blended approach that emphasizes authentic language use to interact tasks and real-life communication activities. Next is the emphasis on learner-centered approaches, teacher-centered approaches to learner-centered approaches that prioritize fluency, communication, and cultural competence. Next is the incorporation of technology. Technology has been integrated into language teaching, providing opportunities for learners to practice all language skills through digital resources, online platforms, and virtual classrooms. That's all. Thank you.